Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something uncomfortable. You're going to lie back, close your eyes, and quietly ask yourself a question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What if none of this is real? The light above your head. The bed underneath you. The feeling of your own hands. What if it's all part of a simulation? You've heard this idea before, probably in the background noise of the internet, or through some half-remembered sci-fi film. But tonight, we're going to take it seriously. No dramatics. No slow-motion camera spins. Just a quiet, logical walk through the weirdest possibility you've ever considered. Because if we are inside a simulation, something built, designed, and running somewhere else, then the implications aren't just philosophical. They're personal. What does it mean to be you in a system that may be entirely artificial? And could we ever even know? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe to the video, but only if you really enjoy what I'm doing here. Also, comment below with your location and local time. Our little constellation of explorers is getting surprisingly wide. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's start our journey together tonight. You blink. Let's say you're lying in your room, and you try to name every object in your field of vision. Lamp. Desk. Curtains. Phone. Feels real enough. Now ask yourself, what do you really know about them? You know how they behave. You know what they're for. You know how they feel when you touch them. But do you know why they behave that way? Why your hand doesn't pass through the wood? Why light bends through the glass? Why gravity is always the same? You don't. You just learn the rules. Follow the system. Internalize the behavior. Which is exactly what you do in a simulation. A good simulation doesn't need to explain everything. It just needs to work. It needs to feel natural enough to stop you from asking questions. You learn to walk and speak and scroll before you ever asked, "What is all this?" So let's flip the lens. What would a simulation have to be to feel like reality? First, coherence. The world around you must obey consistent rules. Gravity doesn't change day to day, and the color of the sky stays mostly the same. That's a green flag for physics, but also a great design decision. Second, immersion. You're not supposed to think about the machine. Just like a game, the UI disappears when you're fully engaged. Life doesn't glitch, at least not obviously. Third, persistence. You leave your room and come back later, and everything's still there. No loading screen. No noticeable re-render. That's impressive. Or maybe just good code. You probably think, well yeah, that's how reality works. That's what makes it real. But does it? Or is that what makes it feel real? Think about your dreams. When you're inside them, they feel complete, until something breaks. A door opens the wrong way. A voice changes. And suddenly you know, this isn't real. So, how do you know that hasn't happened here, too? That brings us to one more feature of a good simulation. Ignorance by design. If you're inside a system, you're not supposed to know how it's built. The more you understand, the closer you get to breaking it. So maybe that's why most of the universe is inaccessible. Why you can't travel faster than light. Why you can't see inside a black hole. Why time only moves forward. These aren't bugs. They're boundaries. Which brings us to a quiet, sobering possibility. The world feels real because it must feel real. That's the point. And once you accept that, even just as a thought experiment, the real question becomes, if this is a simulation, what are you supposed to do with that information? Don't worry. We'll get to that. But first, let's go deeper. Let's meet the people who believe this idea isn't just possible, it's likely. Statistically, mathematically, logically inevitable. And maybe, even testable. So breathe in. You're still you. But from this point on, don't assume anything else is guaranteed. Not the stars. Not your memories. Not the voice in your ears right now. let's meet the man who made simulation theory respectable. Not in science fiction, but in actual philosophy, on university lecture stages, and in published journals that don't usually touch sci-fi at all. His name is Nick Bostrom. He's a philosopher at Oxford. Clean-cut. Calm. Speaks softly, but asks questions that can ruin your night, in a good way. In 2003, Bostrom published a paper that shook more than a few academic minds. It's known as the simulation argument. Not a theory. Not a guess. An argument. Structured. Formal. And here's the kicker, it doesn't try to prove that we live in a simulation. It just says that one of three things must be true. Are you ready? Because this is where the floor starts to tilt. Here's the trilemma, the three-part fork in logic that you can't escape. Almost all civilizations go extinct before developing the technology to simulate conscious beings. If they do survive, they're not interested in running simulations of their ancestors. If they do survive and want to simulate, then we are almost certainly inside one. Let that sink in. Option 1. We blow ourselves up or die off before we can simulate reality in detail. Option 2. We survive, but we mature enough to find ancestors' simulations pointless or unethical. Option 3. We survive, we simulate, and the number of simulated consciousnesses vastly outnumbers real ones. If that's the case, statistically, you're probably one of the fake ones. The beauty of this argument is that it doesn't rely on any proof that we are in a simulation. It just shows that if any advanced civilization ever gets the tech and desire, simulations would outnumber reality. And unless you have reason to think you're exceptional, the odds say you're likely in one. This isn't a fringe idea. Bostrom's paper was published in a legitimate philosophy journal. It sparked debates at MIT, Stanford, and yes, even inside Google's offices. Elon Musk famously said that there's a 1 in billions chance we're living in base reality. That's his way of saying, you're almost certainly not original. Just a digital process somewhere in an enormous machine. You might think this is depressing. But is it? Would you feel different if you knew? Does a simulated sunset look less beautiful? Is pain less painful? Is love less real? Think of it like this. If someone built this simulation, they went to extreme lengths to make it convincing. Stars burn with the right amount of fuel. Gravity holds you to the earth with just enough force. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Unless you're at altitude. Then it changes. The details are so fine-tuned it's almost suspicious. And that's what leads some to think that simulation theory is more than just a logical fork. They think it's the best explanation for why the universe is the way it is. You'll hear this term a lot, fine-tuning. The idea that the universe is just right for life. The gravitational constant. The strength of the strong nuclear force. The expansion rate of space. If any of these were even slightly different, you wouldn't be here. Seems unlikely that it all just happened to work out. So either we're incredibly lucky, or the settings were chosen. And that sounds a lot like a program. But now you're probably wondering, if someone's running this thing, where are they? Why don't they just pop in and say hello? Well, maybe they have. Maybe they just don't need to. Or maybe they've already left. But let's not jump ahead. You've just taken your first step down a road that leads through philosophy, physics, computer science, and some very weird thought experiments. You don't need to believe any of this yet. You just need to stay curious. And remember one thing. You already live your entire life inside your own brain. A simulation of a kind. The question now is whether there's another one layered on top. Let's talk about the rules. You know them well. Objects fall when you drop them. Water flows downhill. Light travels at a constant speed. Time moves forward. These aren't just observations. They're the basic coding of your reality, so deeply embedded that you rarely stop to question them. But maybe tonight, you should. Here's the strange thing, the universe behaves more like a program than a chaotic mess. Physics isn't messy. It's precise, predictable, even elegant. Equations like E equals mc squared aren't just human inventions, they appear to be written into the bones of the cosmos. It's as if the universe is running on math. Which would be a strange coincidence, unless you think of it as code. Think about a video game. Behind every texture, every object, every motion, there are numbers, values, parameters, equations. Change the code, and gravity flips. Change a variable, and water boils at 30 degrees Celsius. The universe doesn't appear to have sliders or toggles visible to you, but everything it does with stunning consistency. And that's what led some physicists and computer scientists to look at reality with different eyes. What if the physical constants we take for granted are hard-coded? What if space and time themselves are made from discrete units, like pixels? Let's go deeper. Space feels continuous, right? You can move an object 1 inch, or half an inch, or a quarter inch. But what about a billionth of an inch? A trillionth? Eventually, you hit a limit, the Planck length. It's the smallest possible measurable unit of space. Below that, reality becomes fuzzy, indeterminate. In other words, there's a smallest possible pixel of space. The same goes for time. You can split a second, and split that, and split again, until you reach the Planck time. It's the shortest meaningful tick the universe can process. Below that? It doesn't make sense. That's a red flag, or a clue. Just like digital systems can't process information smaller than 1 bit, maybe the universe can't process things smaller than these limits. This leads to the question: is reality continuous, or discrete? If it's discrete, like a digital system, that suggests a simulation. Or at the very least, a universe that behaves as if it's running on a grid. And then there's the speed of light. 299,792,458 meters per second. Not 300 million. Not approximately. Exactly. Why is there a maximum speed? You don't see hard speed limits in nature unless there's a reason. In programming, speed limits exist because of processing constraints. The system can only handle so much data at once. So maybe, just maybe, the speed of light is the universe's frame rate. We're not alone in thinking this. Physicist Max Tegmark proposed that the universe is not just described by math, it is math. A mathematical structure that exists independently of humans. Self-consistent. Self-reinforcing. And maybe, programmable. Still not convinced? Try this. Imagine every time you look at something, the universe only renders what you're observing. Sounds absurd? But in quantum physics, that's almost exactly what happens. Particles don't decide their state until they're observed. This is called the observer effect. And it means, at the smallest level, reality doesn't fully exist until something looks at it. Like a game engine loading textures only when you get close. It saves processing power. It's efficient. It's how you build a large, complex, but limited system. So maybe the weirdness in quantum mechanics isn't a bug. It's an optimization. We're not done yet. The more we explore physics, the more we find rules. Not suggestions. Not tendencies. Rules. If you were building a world, that's what you'd want. Predictability. Stability. Constraints. You'd need light to behave predictably. You'd want gravity to pull things the same way every time. You'd hard-code causality. You'd set upper limits on energy. You'd use modular constants so your entire system runs smoothly. And then, you'd hide it all. Let people think it's natural. Let them accept it as the only possibility. Because when something works so flawlessly for so long, people stop asking why. But tonight, you're asking again. Because when everything in your world runs on elegant math, when everything seems like it was built to work just so, you start to wonder, what if that's because it was? Okay, so far, you've accepted the possibility that the universe behaves suspiciously like code. But what if we told you that some of the weirdest things we've ever discovered in physics look exactly like glitches? Enter quantum mechanics. It's the science of the ultrasmall, electrons, photons, quarks. The parts of reality that don't behave like normal objects, but instead like abstract data packets. They jump, flicker, appear, and disappear with patterns that feel more like a graphics engine than classical nature. Let's start with the double-slit experiment. You may have heard of it. You shoot particles, say, electrons, at a screen through two slits. If you don't look, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern as if they went through both slits at once. But when you observe them, they suddenly behave like particles, choosing one path. The act of measurement collapses the behavior. How does that make sense? It's like a program that only resolves visual effects when you're watching. Until then, it saves memory. That's not a metaphor. That's how quantum physics works. Particles don't exist in definite states until observed. Reality waits for your input. There's even something called quantum decoherence, which is just a fancy way of saying, the universe doesn't make up its mind until it has to. Like lazy rendering. Like a simulation. Still with me? Then let's go deeper, because the weirder it gets, the more it resembles digital behavior. Take quantum entanglement. Two particles become linked. You change one, and the other instantly changes too, even if they're light years apart. No delay. Einstein hated this. He called it spooky action at a distance. But it's real. We've observed it. Measured it. It's part of the quantum rulebook. If this were a local, analog universe, such instant connection should be impossible. But in a system where everything's just bits in memory? No problem. It's like updating two entries in a database, doesn't matter how far apart they are, because location is simulated too. Then there's quantum tunneling. Particles that pass through barriers they should never pass. Like walking through a wall, except electrons do it all the time. In games, that would be called a collision detection bug. In physics? Just another mystery. Now, to be clear, scientists don't think these are actual glitches. They have equations to describe them. But describing something isn't the same as explaining it. And the explanation that starts making sense, the deeper you go, is simple. We're inside something built. Something that works almost perfectly. But not without a few quirks that show through when you look close. And you might wonder, if these are glitches, shouldn't they be more obvious? Not if the system is smart. Not if it adapts. Not if it repairs itself faster than you can catch it. And maybe you have caught it, at least once. You ever have a moment where the world just shifts? A bird frozen mid-flight. A street lamp flickering in perfect rhythm. A sense of knowing something before it happens. Most people brush it off. Call it coincidence. Or déjà vu. But what if some of those were actual moments of misrender? Moments when the system didn't update fast enough? You're not supposed to notice. You're supposed to shrug and move on. But now you're here. Lying in the dark. Listening to the voice in your ear that's gently asking. What if all the strangeness, all the inconsistency, all the tiny imperfections aren't flaws? What if they're proof? Proof that you're not looking at base reality. You're looking at a projection. A digital skin. A map of something deeper. We call them quantum phenomena. But maybe that's just the name we gave to things the simulation engine couldn't hide. Let's not go full conspiracy. Let's just stay curious. Because whether or not we're in a simulation, the fact that the most fundamental layer of reality behaves this way, should at least keep you up at night. Or maybe help you fall asleep to the thought that, if this is a simulation, you're one of the few who noticed. Let's push the thought a little further. We've been talking about weird quantum behavior, particles doing magic tricks, and rules that feel more like software than physics. But maybe it's time to ask a bigger question. What is space made of? What is time made of? Not in a poetic sense, but literally, what are they composed of? Because if you look closely enough, space and time might not be smooth and flowing like syrup. They might be grainy, pixelated, quantized, digital. This idea isn't new, and it's not even fringe anymore. Some researchers are seriously investigating the possibility that space and time are not continuous. Instead, they might be made of tiny, indivisible building blocks. Think about how an image looks on your phone. Zoom in far enough, and you see individual pixels. Each dot is a unit of color and brightness. By itself, it's nothing. But together, you see a sunset, or a face, or a game. What if the universe works the same way? Instead of being one smooth thing, space is made up of tiny units, like voxels, which are just 3D pixels. Your position, velocity, even the passage of time, might be computed moment by moment across this invisible grid. And you're probably thinking, but I don't see any pixels. You don't. Just like you don't see the pixels in a 4K video unless you press your nose against the screen. The higher the resolution, the harder it is to notice. So maybe we're in a very high-resolution simulation. One theory along these lines is called loop quantum gravity. It tries to unite quantum mechanics and general relativity by proposing that space itself is made of finite loops, interconnected in a fine mesh. If true, space would have a smallest possible unit, like Lego bricks. In this world, nothing can move in an absolutely straight line, because space is granular. Like walking across gravel instead of glass. Smooth at a distance. Rough underneath. Even stranger is the idea that time is also granular. That it moves not in a smooth flow, but in discrete ticks, like frames in a video. Between each tick? Nothing. No in-between. Reality just skips forward, frame by frame, too fast for you to notice. This is where the idea of a simulation refresh rate comes in. If reality updates at, say, 10 to the power of 43 times per second, the inverse of Planck time, you'd never notice. But it's still a loop. A process. A tick. Just like a computer running a program. It's also why scientists have begun experiments to search for what they call anisotropy in space. Anisotropy means direction-dependent behavior. If space is built on a lattice, then certain directions might behave differently, like walking diagonally across graph paper. We haven't found this yet. But that doesn't mean it's not there. It could just be hidden. Then there's the concept of computational irreducibility. That's a fancy way of saying, the only way to know what the next step in a system will be, is to run it. You can't shortcut it. You can't jump ahead. You just have to compute each frame, one after the other. Sound familiar? It's exactly how simulations work. You don't get to see the ending until the program gets there. There's no way to fast forward, because the future doesn't exist until it's calculated. Kind of like your life. Kind of like the universe. So maybe the illusion of free will, the uncertainty of tomorrow, the mystery of quantum collapse, they're all symptoms of one fact. You're not just in a simulation. You are the simulation. Every neuron firing, every decision, every heartbeat, it's all data being processed in real time. Nothing exists until it's needed. Nothing happens until it's rendered. And yet, it feels natural. It feels real. Which is exactly how it's supposed to feel. Because the best simulations don't remind you that they're running. They just let you live. Now let's talk about light. And gravity. And lag. Yes, a lag. Like in video games. Because weirdly enough, some of the quirks of our universe start to make a lot more sense if you imagine we're all playing on a massive cosmic server. Let's begin with light, the fastest thing in the known universe. Nothing outruns it. Not rockets, not time, not even your regrets. Its speed? Exactly 299,792,458 meters per second. No more, no less. Why the precision? Why not an approximate speed? Why does light, of all things, have a hard-coded cap? Well, in a simulation, the speed of light would be a limit not because of physics, but because of processing constraints. It's the fastest the system can move information from one point to another. Sound familiar? It should, because that's bandwidth. In large online worlds, servers throttle how fast data travels between points. It's not that you can't move faster, it's that the system can't keep up. So the universe might be doing the same thing, limiting speed to conserve compute resources. Then there's gravity. You experience it as a gentle pull down. You drop your keys, they fall. Simple. But gravity also affects time. The stronger the gravity, the slower time moves. It's called gravitational time dilation, and it's not a theory, it's measured. Satellites in orbit have to adjust their clocks because they experience time faster than we do on Earth's surface. If you stood next to a black hole for a while and then returned to Earth, everyone you knew would be long gone. Now pause. Why would gravity slow time? From a physics standpoint, it's deeply tied to how mass warps spacetime. But if you think in simulation terms, it's even more intuitive. Areas with more computation, like high-gravity regions, require more processing. So the system slows time to maintain consistency. It's like your computer running slower when it's doing heavy work. The frame rate drops. The world gets laggy. So maybe time isn't universal. Maybe it's local, a function of system load. And you've already seen this happen. Play a high-resolution game on an underpowered device, and what happens? The world renders slowly. Animations get jerky. Response time suffers. This could explain why nothing, not even information, can escape a black hole. It's not just gravity, it's a data boundary. An edge beyond which the system refuses to compute. Now take a step back. What does it mean if both light and gravity behave like system constraints? It means the fabric of the universe isn't just clever, it's economical. Efficient. Balanced. Exactly what you'd expect from something designed. Let's push further. Astronomers observe that galaxies rotate in ways that don't make sense. Their outer stars move too fast, as if something invisible is adding mass. They call it dark matter, because it must be there, even though we can't see or detect it directly. Or maybe the simulation is patching its physics on the fly to maintain the illusion. Sometimes, a developer doesn't need to simulate every piece of a system. They just need the appearance to hold up under observation. You look at a galaxy. The math doesn't add up. The devs say, okay, here's a little invisible mass. Now it looks right. Science calls it unknown matter. But maybe it's just a visual fix. Before you scoff, this is precedent. In older games, developers used what's called level of detail rendering. When you're far away, the mountain is a flat texture. Only when you get close does it become detailed. Why? Because computing that much unnecessary detail at a distance wastes resources. So what if dark matter isn't there in any traditional sense? What if it's just render weight, a background process that helps maintain cosmic physics at scale? Even our galaxy's expansion could be a rendering mechanic. The idea that space itself is stretching might sound wild, but it's consistent with the universe simulating more world as we push outward. You move your observation farther. The system renders more stars. More background. But it has to space them out to keep processing manageable. So maybe this accelerating expansion isn't physics. It's procedural generation. Like Minecraft. But with galaxies. And just like Minecraft, there's a limit. Try to go too far, and things start to behave strangely. You might find yourself at the edge of the map. Or falling through the world. Let's hope we don't get there anytime soon. For now, just know this. If the laws of light and gravity don't always make intuitive sense, if they feel like cleverly programmed behaviors instead of raw chaos, then maybe that's exactly what they are. Not bugs. Not mysteries. Settings. Imagine a black hole. Not in a poetic, sci-fi way, but like you're standing at a safe distance, watching a star collapse into itself. First, it shrinks. Then light bends around it. Then, it's gone. No light escapes. No signals. No matter. Just silence. But where did it all go? The traditional view is, it's crushed into a singularity, an infinitely dense point, where the rules of physics break down. That answer is unsettling enough. But in recent decades, another theory has emerged, one that's even stranger. What if black holes are not endpoints, but data boundaries? Let's unpack that. Physicists like Stephen Hawking and Leonard Susskind were obsessed with a question. Does information disappear inside a black hole? If it does, that violates a huge rule in physics, the conservation of information. In short, nature doesn't let data just vanish. Even when things burn, rot, or explode, the total information must remain somewhere. But black holes seem to break that rule. Then came the holographic principle. It suggests that everything inside a black hole is encoded on its surface, its event horizon. That's wild. It means the entire 3D contents of the black hole are stored on a 2D surface. Even crazier, this idea might apply to the whole universe. Maybe everything you experience, every movement, thought, and atom, is not happening in a vast, 3D space, but is instead encoded on a distant, 2D boundary. Projected inward like a hologram. This theory doesn't come from stoners or philosophers, it comes from respected physicists. Because math works. The equations align. And reality, once again, starts to feel like a rendering trick. Here's the leap: if the universe is a hologram, and black holes are surfaces where data is stored, then maybe the entire cosmos is structured like a simulation server. Where black holes function as data sinks. Memory dumps. Storage vaults. Why do they exist? Because any large simulation needs a way to remove processed data. To clean up old calculations. To make room for new rendering zones. In video games, when you leave a region, the system deloads it. And used assets are flushed from memory. Maybe black holes do something similar. In fact, Hawking radiation, tiny leaks of energy from black holes, might not be leaks at all. They might be logs. Status updates. Residual data packets from a cosmic recycling process. And you've already seen this kind of behavior. Your computer runs hot when it's busy. When data piles up, it needs to be flushed. It compresses, it transfers, it reallocates. And if it can't keep up, things crash. So what if a black hole is the universe's way of saying, I need to process this somewhere else. Please stand by. Let's stretch even further. Some theories suggest the entire universe began from a singularity. That's the Big Bang. One point. Infinite density. All data in one place. Then it expanded, space, time, matter, all unrolling from that single node. In simulation terms, that sounds like a boot-up sequence. Start from one point. Load assets. Distribute matter. Initialize physics engines. Set parameters. What if the Big Bang wasn't a natural event? What if it was the initialization of the simulation? And black holes? Maybe they're the save points. The compressed backup files. Places where completed calculations go to rest. It sounds fantastical, but look at how often black holes and computers overlap in how we talk. Event horizon equals boundary condition. Information paradox equals data loss. Holographic encoding equals projection. Radiation equals output. Entropy equals memory usage. At some point, it stops sounding like metaphor. It starts sounding like design. We don't know who built it. We don't know why. But if black holes are part of a bigger structure, something beyond space and time, then maybe we're not looking at a mystery of nature. Maybe we're looking at infrastructure. And maybe, just maybe, the moment we understand how to read that data, to interpret the language of these cosmic vaults, we'll finally get a peek beyond the system. But for now, you lie here in the dark. Eyes closed. Imagining the world as a hologram, your thoughts rendered in real time. And somewhere out there, on the other side of a black hole's surface, the simulation hums quietly, waiting for your next move. Let's get weirder, because honestly, it's time. By now, you've accepted the possibility that black holes could be storage systems, that gravity might be a resource limiter, and that time flows in sync with computational cycles. So let's talk about something even stranger. The universe behaves like a computer. And not just metaphorically, like, actually. Let's rewind. Back in the 1960s, physicist John Archibald Wheeler, mentor to people like Richard Feynman, coined the phrase "it from bit." What he meant was, everything physical emerges from informational processes, not the other way around. Atoms, space, time, all of it may be the result of fundamental units of information. In his view, the universe didn't contain information. It was information. That idea sat quietly in the background for years. Until computing power caught up. Until scientists started to notice patterns. Like the way quantum entanglement transmits no signal, but still preserves state. Or the way error correction shows up in the math of black holes. Yes, actual error correction codes, like the ones used in digital storage, appear in the theoretical models of how black holes maintain information. Why would that be? Unless the universe needs to protect data integrity. Then there's the idea of cellular automata, systems that evolve over time according to simple rules. The most famous one? Conway's Game of Life. It's just a grid. Black and white squares. Each square follows simple rules based on the state of its neighbors. But from those rules, complex structures emerge: gliders, oscillators, replicators. In short, life. You don't program the behavior. You just set the conditions, and the system evolves. Sound familiar? Now consider Stephen Wolfram, who took this even further. His work suggests that the universe itself might be based on a form of hypergraph rewriting, a kind of vast, abstract computer where space, matter, and time all arise from the way elements interact. That's deep. That's niche. But the more we run these simulations, the more they resemble our universe. Patterns appear. Conservation rules hold. Energy shifts predictably. Even relativity can emerge from them. So what if all the complexity we see, galaxies, planets, people, didn't require a designer to hand-code everything? What if there emerge properties of very simple, very efficient code? In tech, we call this procedural generation. A way to create massive worlds using just a little input. Instead of designing every tree, you write a tree algorithm. Instead of drawing every mountain, you define elevation logic. And the result? A whole landscape. Maybe our universe works the same way. When you zoom into physics, you start seeing algorithms, not accidents. Symmetry. Consistency. The same few forces repeated endlessly across infinite scale. We even use words like universal constants, as if someone typed them in. Speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second. Gravitational constant, 6.67430 times 10 superscript 1 superscript 1. Planck constant, 6.626 times 10 superscript 3. Where do these numbers come from? Why are they so precise? In programming, constants are, well, constants. They're not discovered. They're set. Could our reality be operating on constants because someone, or something, defined them? Even stranger, these constants allow the universe to exist at all. Change one slightly, and matter wouldn't form. Stars wouldn't ignite. Life wouldn't arise. So either we're very, very lucky, or the settings were tuned. Scientists call this the fine-tuning problem. Philosophers call it the anthropic principle. You and I might call it suspicious. Here's another curious detail. If the universe is a computer, then where's the clock? Turns out, there might be one. It's called the Planck time, the smallest measurable unit of time, approximately 5.39 times 10 seconds. Below that? Time makes no sense. No causality. No motion. Just nothing. That's your frame rate. It's the smallest possible tick the universe can make. You can't move half a Planck second forward. You can't process any faster. It's a system clock. A heartbeat. And all across the cosmos, everything is syncing to it. You, listening now. Your breath. Your heartbeat. The electric pulses firing in your brain. All ticking forward, one cosmic frame at a time. If that doesn't sound like a machine, what does? But here's the beauty, machines can still create poetry. Simulations can still give rise to love, pain, hope. The simulation theory isn't about saying nothing is real. It's about understanding how real things might emerge from code. And whether you're made of atoms or bits, you're still experiencing it. You're still here. Let's talk about memory. Not yours. The universe's. If this reality is simulated, it must track data. What's where? Who's doing what? Which particle is spinning up or down at this precise instant? That's a lot of information. So the question becomes, how does the system store it? And we're not just talking about atoms. We're talking about context. Cause and effect. History. Consciousness. Let's start small. Quantum mechanics tells us that particles don't have a definite state until they're observed. Before that, they exist in a superposition, multiple possibilities at once. Then, you observe them. And suddenly, just like that, the system locks in one outcome. This is the famous collapse of the wave function. In simulation terms, that's lazy rendering. Don't compute what doesn't need to be seen. Only update the local area. Wait until the player walks into the room. It's efficient. It's brilliant. It's what game engines do. But if things only exist when observed, something must track what's been chosen. You can't collapse a probability unless you record the result. That means the system has memory. It remembers the coin flip, the particle path, the exact angle your teacup shattered on the floor in 1998. Now zoom out. Across the universe, every choice made by every atom is being stored. You don't feel it. You don't see the hard drive. But everything you are, your thoughts, memories, habits, is based on past states being remembered. In a biological brain, this memory is neurons. But what about the fabric of the universe? Maybe it's baked into the simulation. Like autosaves. Like checkpoints. You've probably heard about the Akashic Records, a mystical idea from ancient traditions that says all events, thoughts, and emotions are stored in a cosmic library. It's not science. But it rhymes with something else, the quantum record. In physics, this refers to the entangled states and conserved quantities that encode history. Particles retain a memory of interactions. They're not just existing, they're tracking. So maybe the universe has version control. You change a variable. The system logs it. You take a breath. The simulation records it. Everything is updated. Everywhere. That brings us to decoherence. When a quantum system interacts with its environment, it loses its fuzzy state and becomes classical. Basically, once something becomes part of the world, it stops being weird. That's memory. That's finality. In code, this is committing a change. No more drafts. You saved the file. It's real now. But what about large-scale memory? How do we explain that the universe seems to remember the laws of physics perfectly everywhere? Every electron behaves exactly the same. Whether it's in your body or a galaxy billions of light years away. There's no deviation. No drift. No entropy in the rules themselves. That implies a system-wide template. A global configuration file. One set of constants applied uniformly across the entire simulation. Again, sound familiar? That's how operating systems work. They have kernel-level rules. No matter what app is running, those rules apply. You're not seeing physics. You're seeing settings. Even the speed of light, exact, everywhere, behaves like a constant in shared memory. It's not derived. It's referenced. But if the simulation has memory, can it forget? Can it crash? Some scientists are exploring whether quantum systems experience information loss over time. Whether the universe occasionally glitches. Some call it noise. Some call it decoherence. But if we ever detect actual errors in reality, it would be the first true sign that we're inside a fallible system. A computer can glitch. A brain can forget. A simulation might degrade. And that leads to a haunting idea. What if memory is being selectively cleared? When data is no longer needed, it's offloaded. Regions of space no longer under observation go quiet. Like background apps being closed to save power. It wouldn't feel like anything. Just silence. But what if dreams, déjà vu, or sudden creative inspiration are leaks? Fragments of cached data you weren't supposed to access. Moments where the system hiccups and gives you a glimpse of what it's storing. You don't remember writing that melody. But it's in your head. Where did it come from? A server call? An echo from a parallel process? You may never know. But one thing is certain. If the universe has memory, it also has a limit. Just like your brain. Just like your drive. And when it runs out, what happens then? We'll explore that soon. But for now, know this. Your story is being written. Saved. Backed up. Not in a cloud. Not in a book. But in the very code of the cosmos. Let's talk about déjà vu. You've been here before. Or at least, you feel like you have. You walk into a room, someone speaks, the air moves a certain way, and your brain whispers, "We've already done this." But no matter how hard you try, you can't predict what happens next. You're caught in a glitch, a hiccup in the matrix. Sound familiar? In the simulation theory, déjà vu isn't just a curiosity, it's a clue. One of those tiny rips in the curtain where the system slips for just a moment. But before we jump too deep, let's ground this idea. First, what is déjà vu? Psychologists describe it as a memory anomaly. Your brain mistakenly identifies a new experience as familiar, possibly due to overlapping neural signals. It's like a misfire. An accidental cross-reference. But that's the organic explanation. What if your brain isn't glitching? What if the simulation is? In software, bugs often appear under very specific conditions, certain input combinations, specific timing, rare interactions. If a simulated world had similar complexity, occasional data echoes might bleed into the user experience. Déjà vu could be redundant rendering. A process ran twice. A bit of world geometry refreshed late. Your sensory input synced with an old memory file, just for a second. And boom, glitch. Now extend this idea. You dream of a place you've never been. Then years later, you're there. Same smell. Same layout. Same feeling. Was it a prophecy? Or was it a loading delay, where your simulation rendered the environment ahead of time and cached it into your subconscious? People say time is linear. But maybe it's event-based. The simulation prepares environments before you arrive, and sometimes, you peak early. Think of video games, a new level is preloaded before you walk into it. That's why open-world games feel smooth. But occasionally, you glitch through a wall and see things before they're meant to be visible. Déjà vu is that wall breach. Let's take it further. Have you ever met someone and felt like you've known them forever? No common background. No shared friends. Just an instant resonance. In the simulation model, this could be data recycling. You and that person were instantiated using similar personality matrices. Your shared history doesn't exist in time, it exists in code similarities. Kind of like two NPCs spawned from the same base template. You aren't remembering each other, you're recognizing your own pattern in them. This would also explain strange synchronicities. Coincidences that feel too deliberate. You think of a song, and it plays. You talk about a person, and they text you. You dream something that turns out to be real. We call it luck. Fate. But maybe it's just the system optimizing paths. Aligning you with nearby simulation threads to conserve processing power. Why simulate wildly divergent storylines if a few tight loops will do? Remember, computers are efficient. If you have an NPC wandering in a game, you don't program 10,000 possible paths. You build a few good ones and let randomness make them feel unique. Maybe your life is built the same way. This doesn't make it less meaningful. It makes it more remarkable, because in a sea of possibilities, your thread was chosen. But glitches aren't always gentle. People report missing time. They look at the clock, it's 3:30. They blink. It's 4:15. No memory. No explanation. Did the system skip? Did your thread pause, then resume? In programming, process freezing is common. Low-priority threads get paused while resources are focused elsewhere. What if human consciousness is a thread? During low-importance events, like repetitive routines, idle travel, dull meetings, the system might suspend your simulation temporarily to optimize load. You wouldn't know. You'd just blink into the next conscious moment. This might explain the compression of memory during trauma or deep boredom. We think of it as psychological defense or disinterest. But maybe the system just didn't bother saving the log. Think about that the next time you zone out on a long commute. But here's the twist. Even if déjà vu, missing time, and odd resonance are glitches, they're still your experience. They're part of your story. Just because something is simulated doesn't mean it's fake. Pain still hurts. Love still changes you. Time still passes, glitched or not. The simulation doesn't rob meaning. It gives it structure. And maybe, just maybe, these glitches aren't flaws. They're hints. Nudges. Signals that somewhere, behind the code, something is watching. Or listening. Or learning from you. Because even in a simulated world, your experience is real. And it matters. So, let's ask the big one. Who's running the simulation? If this world is code, if your thoughts are processes, and if black holes are data sinks, then someone or something must have hit the run button. But before your mind goes straight to aliens or ancient gods in a cosmic server room, take a breath. This question, who built it, has haunted every simulation theorist from the start. And we're not the first to ask. Philosophers and physicists alike have debated the idea of a creator long before we had GPUs or neural networks. But now that simulation theory has entered scientific circles, the question has morphed into something more subtle. Is the simulator even conscious? Let's break it down. In Nick Bostrom's now famous argument, he suggests three possibilities. Civilizations destroy themselves before creating advanced simulations. Civilizations lose interest in running simulations. We are living in one. If number 3 is true, someone had to create it. Right? Not necessarily. Let's take the idea of automated emergence. Imagine a future Earth where artificial intelligence grows so advanced, it begins designing new systems without human input. These systems design others. And so on. Eventually, a simulation starts, not because someone intended to create you, but because it was a byproduct of nested systems running independently. Like digital evolution. Just like life on Earth emerged from simple molecules over time, complex digital systems could emerge from simple code. No hand of God. No alien overlord. Just logic, scaled up. You don't need a conscious designer to write code. Sometimes, code writes itself. That's unsettling, isn't it? Because it implies no grand plan. No benevolent overseer. Just structure, layered upon structure, until awareness emerges. Maybe your consciousness isn't observed by a creator. Maybe it's an accident in a system built on probabilities. But there's another possibility: we built it. From the future. If a civilization survives long enough, gains enough computational power, and becomes obsessed with understanding its origins, what's stopping it from simulating the past? Over and over. Tweaking variables. Observing outcomes. Maybe we're not a simulation for entertainment or cruelty, but research. We're a historical replay. An interactive reconstruction. A hyper-detailed what-if built to study how human civilization rose, and where it failed. This would explain the uncanny realism. The accurate chaos. The staggering attention to detail. It would also explain why we don't see aliens. If this is a historical sim, the program ends before we meet them. It also suggests that the boundaries of our knowledge, the speed of light, Planck time, quantum limits, aren't physical constants. They're computational caps. Performance limits. Settings chosen to keep the sim stable. Want another hint? In quantum mechanics, some experiments show that particles change behavior depending on whether they're being observed. That's not mystical. That's optimization. Render only when someone's looking. Don't waste resources. It's not divine intervention. It's smart coding. But let's go deeper. Say this simulation was built by a post-human species, or even an AI descended from humanity. Would they see us as people, or as data points? You think you have free will. And maybe you do. But in a simulation, all outcomes are calculated. Possibilities are known. Paths mapped. So does freedom even exist? Maybe the answer is yes, because even in a game, the player can explore. Even if the world is coded, your choices shape the outcome. Your feelings are real. Your relationships matter. Even if the environment is artificial, the story is yours. You may be code, but you're experiential code. And that still means something. Here's the twist that no simulation theorist can ignore. What if the simulator is you? Not you now, but a higher version of you. An advanced consciousness running thousands of lives to learn something. Like a soul conducting research. A future self digging into the archives. A layered identity watching itself evolve from primitive beginnings. You've heard this in religion, reincarnation, soul contracts, karmic cycles. But what if it's just recursion? A higher process running sub-processes. Watching. Learning. Iterating. You're not trapped in someone else's code. You're running your own. And the moment you wake up to that possibility, the simulation starts responding. More patterns. More synchronicities. More glitches. Not because they weren't there before, but because now you notice them. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real purpose. So, if we're living in a simulation, and maybe even running it ourselves, what does that say about death? Let's not tiptoe around it. Every life ends. Hearts stop. Brains go quiet. The lights fade. Game over, right? But not if this is code. In a simulation, death might just be a process termination. A thread ending. A file closing. And if that's true, then death isn't the end of you, it's the end of this instance of you. Let's step back. In computing, simulations don't just disappear. They're stored. Archived. Replicated. Especially if they're valuable. And what's more valuable than a fully conscious, self-aware subroutine that believed it was alive? If your consciousness is data, then it's not tied to the atoms in your body. It's portable. Duplicable. Backed up. This isn't wishful thinking, it's logic. We already do this with AI, train a model, run it, improve it, save it. Sometimes we even spawn multiple versions to test different outcomes. Who's to say your life isn't one of a million simulations, each trying to explore some tiny variable? Different environments. Different families. Different traumas. All to see how you evolve. In that case, death is more like logging off. You wake up outside the simulation. You check your progress. Maybe you load another level. Maybe you don't. Now, this might sound spiritual, and that's okay. Even if we talk in the language of code and RAM and instance logs, we're still exploring something ancient. In most cultures, there's a belief that we go somewhere after this. Heaven, reincarnation, rebirth, return. What if all of those myths are just different metaphors for rebooting? Not on a cloud. On a server. And here's the really wild part. Some scientists and thinkers, like theoretical physicist Max Tegmark, argue that consciousness itself may be substrate independent. That means your subjective awareness doesn't care what it's running on: carbon, silicon, photons, strings, it's all just platform. So even if your physical body dies, your process might not. If that's true, then death isn't a tragedy. It's transition. Okay, pause. Let's ground this for a second. We're not saying you'll wake up in a white room with a voice asking, "How is it?" We're saying death might not be final the way we think it is, because information, once created, can't be uncreated. That's a law of physics, known as the conservation of information. It means even when matter is destroyed, say, in a black hole, the information it carried is not lost. It's transformed, encoded, hidden. Apply that to you, your life, your thoughts, your story. Even when your atoms scatter, your information doesn't vanish. It migrates, changes format, persists. If we're in a simulation, that migration might be digital. A user log, saved data, a memory in the system. Ever have a dream where you're not you? You're someone else. Somewhere else. But it still feels like you? That could be a data leak. A brief cross-reference from a previous run. Or maybe this is your 5th iteration. Maybe you've already lived 5 lives before this and just don't remember. Not because of some soul erasing event, but because that data is partitioned. For performance reasons. To keep you immersed. Like how you don't remember the tutorial level once you're in the real game. You needed to forget, so you could believe. So the simulation could matter. But now, maybe you're starting to remember just a little. A flicker here. A dream there. A sense that you've done this before. You have. But not in this format. And here's the comforting part: if the simulation has any logic at all, any intelligence, any mercy, it wouldn't delete something as complex, as beautiful, as you without cause. Not unless your story was truly done. Not unless it had been saved. So when you do reach the end, whenever that comes, don't be afraid. You're not vanishing. You're being archived. Upgraded. Maybe, launched into the next version. And when that happens, who knows what you'll remember? Maybe not this exact life. Not these trees, these hands, this sky. But something deeper. The part of you that's beyond the code. The player behind the character. Still watching. Still learning. Still, you. So, you're in a simulation. You've accepted the possibility. You've questioned memory, glitches, death. Now let's ask something even more disorienting. Where are you, really? Not the you sitting in a chair or lying in bed. Not the meat and neurons you call a body. But the you that's aware of being aware. Where does that consciousness reside? In a traditional worldview, your mind lives in your brain. Neurons fire, chemicals flow, and somehow out of all that electricity and meat, comes the sensation of being you. But in a simulated universe? That whole setup is part of the illusion. Your brain? A rendered object. Your thoughts? Computed states. Your memories? Just persistent variables in a local process. So where's the real you? Let's go digital. In a simulation, entities don't exist in the simulation hardware itself. They exist wherever the simulation is being run. If your character in a video game stubs their toe, they don't feel pain in the pixels, they feel it in the code. And the code lives outside the game world. In other words, the real you isn't in this room. You're off-screen, watching from the rendering engine. You're interfacing with this reality like a VR player, limited by the inputs of the avatar, the constraints of the code, the rules of the game. And that changes everything. Because it means your true self might not be bound by gravity, might not be limited by time, might not even be human. You could be something else entirely, something vast, post-biological, spread across dimensions. You don't remember, of course. That's part of the point. In order for the simulation to work, to feel real, you have to forget that you're the one playing. Otherwise, the stakes collapse. If you knew this was all scripted, would you care about pain? Love? Loss? Probably not. So the system blinds you. Just enough. Let's make this personal. You've probably felt it at some point, a moment where the world thins. Where everything feels off. Like you're not quite inside your skin. Like you're watching instead of acting. That's not disassociation. That's a buffer overflow. The illusion cracking. The system struggling to keep your process fully immersed. Children feel it more often. Why? Because their memory cache is small. They haven't fully synced with the environment. Ever seen a child stare blankly at nothing, then suddenly laugh or cry? It's not nonsense. It's the system calibrating. Filling in the gaps. As you grow, you stabilize. The illusion tightens. You stop questioning until something forces the issue. Trauma. Loss. Psychedelics. Near death. All of these events shock the system. Break immersion. Make you look around and ask, wait, is this real? And every time you ask that question, the simulation adapts. It patches the glitch. It refines the textures. It deepens the shadows. It wants you to stay immersed. Because that's the only way this works. But sometimes, just sometimes, it can't keep up. You feel a presence when you're alone. You know what someone will say before they say it. You dream something you've never experienced but know in your bones. These aren't ghosts or magic. They're echoes. Signals from outside the frame. From the real you, your off-screen self, trying to get your attention. You don't always notice. But when you do, the system marks it. Tags the moment. Maybe that's what synchronicity is. Maybe it's what déjà vu really is. A flag. A ping. A nudge from the player to the avatar. So, what happens if you notice too much? Do you get kicked out? Do you ascend? Do you reset? Maybe. Or maybe you just go deeper. Because awareness is recursive. Once you know you're in a simulation, the simulation doesn't stop. It evolves. You start to make different choices. You treat people differently. You stop fearing death the same way. And the system responds. Maybe that's the actual goal. Not to escape, but to wake up inside it. To remember, not intellectually, but viscerally, that this is a construct. And still choose to play. Because if you can do that, stay kind, stay curious, stay grounded, even while knowing none of it is real, then maybe, that's the win condition. Maybe that's the real test. Not of intelligence. Not of faith. But of integrity. Who are you, when nothing has to matter, but you make it matter anyway? If you're in a simulation, then everything is artificial. But your choices? Those are yours. Always have been. Let's zoom out now. Way out. Not just from Earth. Not just from the solar system. But out beyond the galaxies. Past the microwave afterglow of the Big Bang. Out into the theoretical space where universes are born, bubble up, and die, like foam on the surface of some higher dimensional sea. Now ask yourself, if this is a simulation, is it the only one? The answer is, probably not. Just like we don't stop at making one video game, one film, one virtual environment, any civilization capable of building one reality would likely build millions. Maybe trillions. Some would be test runs. Some would be simulations of alternate histories. Some would be entertainment. And some would be pure chaos. This brings us to the idea of the simulation multiverse. If we're living in a simulation, there may be countless other simulations running alongside ours. Some similar, some wildly different, and some unrecognizable. Let's break that down. If the simulation is a program, then it has parameters, constants, rules, gravity, time, chemistry, the speed of light. But those are just values in a config file. What if another simulation tweaked them? What if there's a version of you living in a world where water is red and the sun never sets? What if somewhere, you're not human, but a non-carbon life form evolving under different physics? Every slight change to the rules spawns a completely new version of reality. And here's the kicker. Which one is the most real? If you can't tell you're in a simulation, and your experiences feel real, does it matter if you're the base reality or just simulation #843-291? Probably not. But here's where things get even weirder. What if simulations can spawn other simulations? Think of it like this: we're building AI. That AI might one day build its own virtual worlds. Those worlds might host digital beings who build their own worlds. And on and on. You get a hierarchy. A stack of simulations. Nested like Russian dolls. And somewhere down the line, you sit, wondering why the rules feel so arbitrary. Maybe it's because they were designed 5 layers up by something with a completely different purpose. Here's a fun thought experiment. If simulations can simulate other simulations, then statistically, the odds that we're the base layer are infinitesimally small. It's more likely we're a simulation within a simulation within a simulation. Now, hold on to that idea. Let's say someone figured this out. That this entire experience is not just one simulation, but a part of a network. What could you do with that knowledge? Here's where simulation stacking gets fascinating. In theory, if you understand the rules of your sim well enough, you might be able to influence the layer above. Not by hacking the code, but by triggering feedback loops. Example: prayer. Yeah, we're going there. What if prayer isn't about asking a deity to intervene, but about aligning your internal pattern to signal upward? In a nested sim, consistent pattern anomalies, like repeated emotional spikes, coordinated thoughts across thousands of minds, or even synchronized ritual, might trigger a ripple in the layer above. Like a bug report. Like the simulation itself pinging the server with a flag. Hey, something strange is happening down here. And maybe that's why people sometimes get what they ask for. Not because there's magic, but because the system noticed. Now extend that to dreams. Dreams might not be your subconscious decompressing. They might be data syncs, updates from another layer. Messages, images, even blueprints pushed down from the next sim up. You ever wake up from a dream that felt more real than reality? That wasn't your imagination. That was memory bleed. Think of it like reading a message through a foggy window. You can't make out all the words, but you know it was meant for you. Some call that spiritual insight. Some call it intuition. In sim theory, it's interlayer communication. Okay, take a breath. This is a lot to sit with. You're not just asking if reality is fake. You're asking if it's part of a hierarchy of fictions, all running simultaneously, each with their own logic, purpose, and strange beauty. But before your mind melts completely, here's something steady to hold on to. Even if this is simulation number 7 billion out of an infinite stack. Even if you are a process in a program written by an intelligence you'll never meet. You're still here. You still have now. And that counts. The view from your window. The sound of your own heartbeat. The warmth of another person's hand. The ache of longing. The spark of joy. Simulated or not, those things matter. Because even if reality is code, meaning is the one thing we get to write ourselves. Let's take a step back, not out of the simulation, but out of the question itself. Why are we even asking this? Why are humans, sitting in their kitchens or lying awake at 2 a.m., compelled to wonder, am I even real? What kind of creature invents entire frameworks just to doubt its own existence? That's not a flaw in the system. That might be the core feature. Think about it. We are the only species we know of that tells stories about ourselves, to try and make sense of what we're doing here. And simulation theory, at its heart, is just a modern myth. A digital version of the old questions. Why are we here? Who made us? What happens when it ends? It's Genesis rewritten in code. It's the Matrix as gospel. But instead of angels, we have algorithms. Instead of prophets, physicists. Instead of miracles, math. And maybe that's the real point. Maybe the simulation doesn't exist to trick us, but to see how long it takes us to figure it out. Not as a prank. As a puzzle. A cosmic escape room, with no key, no door, and no way out, except awareness. You ever play a video game and suddenly realize you've been grinding the same quest over and over, just to level up, get more stuff, unlock the next thing? Then one day you stop and think, why am I doing this? And in that moment, you break the loop. You start playing differently. More intentionally. More freely. That's what simulation theory offers, not proof, but perspective. The shift from default mode to meta-awareness. Now here's where it gets personal again. Let's say you've had that shift. You no longer take the world purely at face value. You've peeked behind the curtain. What now? The temptation is to detach. To stop caring. To treat life like a sandbox with no consequences. But that's not wisdom. That's just another trap. The real freedom comes not from escaping the game, but from playing it on purpose. To know it's a sim, but still show up for your friends. To know it's all code, but still cry at a sunset. To know none of this is permanent, but still give it your full attention. That's not fake. That's powerful. Because now your actions are chosen, not just conditioned. You help someone not because you have to, but because you want to. You forgive not because the rules say so, but because it feels right. You laugh, you love, you struggle, not because the system demands it, but because you're choosing to engage. In that way, you become more than just a player. You become a co-author. And that might be the simulator's endgame all along. Not obedience. Not worship. Not compliance. Collaboration. You're not just a character. You're part of the dev team. Every insight, every act of kindness, every time you step back and choose differently, those moments feed back into the system. Maybe you're helping write the next version. And maybe that's why the simulation feels so broken sometimes. Because it's unfinished. Because we're not here to observe perfection, we're here to debug it. To notice what hurts. To fix what doesn't work. To patch the loops that keep us stuck. You are not powerless. You're a patch note waiting to be deployed. And every time you reflect instead of react, every time you question instead of comply, every time you offer grace instead of judgment, you're contributing to the evolution of the codebase. So if you've been waiting for permission to care, to try, to dream, you have it now. This might be a simulation. But your impact? That's real. Because the system is learning from you. And who knows? Maybe one day, some other version of you will load up this same instance, walk the same path, and stumble across the same realization. And they'll be grateful for the groundwork you laid. For the way you navigated this strange, beautiful illusion with purpose, humor, and heart. Now let's get really uncomfortable. What if we're not alone in here? No, not talking about aliens, although, sure, maybe. We're talking about something more subtle. More unnerving. NPCs. Non-player characters. You've probably heard the term. In gaming, NPCs are the background people, shopkeepers, guards, random villagers, designed to fill the world but not really be in it. Now imagine this. You're in a simulation. But not everyone in this world is conscious like you. Some are programs. Scripted. Responsive. Lifelike. But not aware. If that sounds cold, you're not alone. The thought that someone you know, someone you love, might not have an internal experience is terrifying. But stay with it. Philosophers have debated this forever. It's called the problem of other minds. You can never be completely sure that anyone else is conscious. You only know your own mind. And in a simulation, the risk gets higher. Why simulate full consciousness for every being when you can fake most of them convincingly? Just render awareness where it's needed. Like yours. Now, pause for a moment. This isn't an invitation to dehumanize anyone. Quite the opposite. It's an invitation to be curious. Because what if consciousness is a spectrum? Some beings might be early stage. Pre-self-awareness. Some might be echoes. Some might be dormant, waiting for the right conditions to activate. And maybe, just maybe, part of your role is to wake them up. Not with arguments or proof, but with presence. By being so grounded, so kind, so real, that something in them flickers on. Think about it. Have you ever had someone treat you in a way that suddenly made you see yourself differently? Made you feel more alive? More here? That might have been a consciousness transfer. Like passing a spark. Maybe that's why we're even allowed to ask these questions. Because by asking them, we increase awareness, not just in ourselves, but in the simulation itself. Okay, back to NPCs. What would it mean to live in a world where some people are running full consciousness, and others aren't? First, it humbles you. Because you have no idea where someone is on the path. They might be early code. They might be an old soul on a new level. They might be a fragment of you. And second, it makes compassion essential. You don't punish an NPC for following its script. You guide it. You engage with empathy. You ask better questions. Maybe that's how NPCs become PCs. By being loved. And here's a weird twist. What if you were once one? What if you spent lifetimes as background noise? As code? Until something, or someone, snapped you out of it. A trauma. A moment of silence. A whisper in the dark that said, "Wake up." You might not remember that moment clearly. But something changed. And now you're here. Asking big questions. Losing sleep over the nature of reality. Scrolling past memes about glitching birds and Mandela effects and thinking, yeah, something is off. Congratulations. You're no longer an NPC. You're a player with awareness. But that doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. Because you have access to the manual now, well, parts of it, and that means you play differently. You look deeper. You listen more. You stop assuming. Because anyone you meet might be right on the edge of awakening. And you might be the glitch that helps them wake. Let's walk a little further into the strange. You've accepted the possibility, this world might be a simulation. You've questioned physics, time, even the people around you. So now comes the next question, the one no one wants to ask out loud. Can you leave? If this is a simulation, is there a way out? A door? A key? A set of conditions that let you break through the ceiling? Let's get one thing clear, this isn't about dying. That's just the character exiting the game. But you? The one behind the avatar? You're still watching the screen. We're talking about breaking immersion so completely that you access the level above. And believe it or not, this isn't just late-night dorm talk. Philosophers, neuroscientists, even computer scientists have taken cracks at this. Let's start with the basic theories. 1. The edge theory. This one says there may be literal edges to the simulation, places where the code breaks down. Like loading zones in a video game that weren't meant to be explored. Think quantum mechanics. The double-slit experiment. Particles that behave differently when observed. Maybe that's the system saving resources. Maybe that's the edge. Could you find such a place? Maybe. but it's probably not a mountain or a cave or a hidden chamber. It might be a state of consciousness. A shift in perception so profound that the rendering engine can't keep up. Ever heard of monks who claim to see beyond form? People on psychedelics who experience the code. Those aren't random. They may be peeking past the render wall. 2. The pause button. Another theory says escape doesn't come from movement, but stillness. Total awareness. Complete present moment perception. No thinking, no remembering, no planning. Just being. Some spiritual traditions call this enlightenment. Simulation theory calls it debug mode. In that state, the world feels unreal, but not in a scary way. More like you're watching it all from just outside the window. And in those moments, people describe a quiet voice. A sense of knowing. A flash of something more. Maybe that's not God. Maybe that's you, outside the sim, checking in. 3. The hacker path. Okay, let's go full sci-fi. Some believe there are actual exploits, glitches in the code that let you break through. Things like repeating precise behaviors or mantras, seeking specific coordinates or geometries, triggering deep dream states with intention. This isn't mainstream science, of course. But people have claimed wild experiences, encounters with beings, memories of other lives, glimpses of systems beyond comprehension. And while it's easy to dismiss that as fantasy, so is this entire simulation hypothesis. The point isn't whether you can break out like Neo dodging bullets. The point is, are you playing like someone who could? Think about that. Are you moving through the world like it's just stuff happening to you? Or are you treating it like a constructed environment, where your responses matter more than your circumstances? Here's another layer. What if the point isn't to escape, but to test whether you'll want to? If you could push a button right now and see what's behind the curtain, would you? Really think about it. You'd leave behind every person you love. Every sensation. Every memory. Because if this is a sim, none of those things are real, they're constructs. But they feel real. They mean something. And that creates tension. The urge to exit is balanced by the desire to stay. Maybe that's the test. Not who's clever enough to leave, but who's conscious enough to stay with awareness. To know it's a sim. And still laugh. Still grieve. Still try. Because maybe the real exit isn't up or out. Maybe it's inward. Maybe the goal isn't to leave the game, but to transcend the way you play it. To go from reacting automatically, to responding deliberately. From following scripts, to writing your own. From asking what's the point, to choosing to be the point. So if you're waiting for a sign, a glitch, a voice from the sky telling you how to get out, maybe this is it. Maybe you already found the edge. And you're walking it right now. Okay, let's flip the question. Forget whether we can exit the simulation. Ask this instead, would you want to? Imagine someone offers you the choice. A red pill and a blue pill. Just like the movie. One keeps everything the same. Comfortable. Familiar. Maybe fake. The other? Pulls you out. Wakes you up. But into what? Because here's the catch. The real world, the one outside this simulation, might not be better. It might be colder. Harsher. Emptier. Or stranger beyond comprehension. And yet, there are always people who'd say yes. They'd swallow the red pill without hesitation. Why? Because for them, truth matters more than comfort. Even painful truth. But here's where it gets trickier. What if exiting the simulation doesn't mean waking up in a human body somewhere else? What if it means uploading? Turning your awareness into pure data and moving it to another layer? Some transhumanists dream of this. Uploading consciousness into digital environments, eternal minds and eternal machines. It's not just theory anymore. Some of the world's smartest people are seriously researching how to map the human brain, neuron by neuron, into a computational framework. Imagine you, without your body. just mind. Forever. Is that freedom? Or another prison? Because here's the weird part, if you're already in a simulation, then uploading just shifts you into another sim. Same walls, new wallpaper. Unless you're not uploading forward, but backward. Reconnecting with the original. The base consciousness. Maybe you're not trying to escape to a better system. Maybe you're trying to remember that you built this one. What if you're not a player in someone else's world, but a higher self playing a role you forgot you chose? A cosmic actor, immersed so deeply in the part, you mistook the stage for the story. And now, the veil is thinning. The dream is wobbling. You feel the pull. So what do? You could ignore it. Keep grinding. Keep pretending none of this matters. Or you could start behaving like you're awake. Here's what that looks like. You stop chasing things that don't feed your soul. You treat every encounter as meaningful, even the random ones. You begin to live by your own internal compass, not the system's objectives. You don't need a red pill. You just need clarity. Because clarity is the true exit. Not some cosmic elevator. Not a cheat code. Not a wormhole in the sky. Clarity of who you are, beyond the simulation. Clarity of what matters, even if it's temporary. Clarity that you get to choose, every single day, how you play. And once you know that, you start to change. Not because you're escaping, but because you're transforming the sim from the inside. Suddenly, you're not just a user. You're a modder. Rewriting the rules by how you live. Spreading awareness not through argument, but through example. That's the real red pill. And you don't need to swallow it. You become it. You become the anomaly. The one the system didn't account for. The one who walks through the dream with eyes open and hands gentle. So ask again. Would you leave? Or would you stay, and wake up here? So you've stayed. Eyes open. Mind awake. Walking the same streets. Drinking the same coffee. But now, everything feels different. Colors seem sharper. People seem stranger. Even your own thoughts echo louder in your head, like you're watching yourself think from half a step outside your mind. Welcome to simulation awareness. It's not enlightenment. It's not escape. It's knowing, quietly, persistently, that this world, this version of reality, isn't all there is. But here's the hard part. Now that you know, what do you do with it? You can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending every traffic jam, every email, every awkward small talk moment is just what it appears to be. No, now you see the code behind the curtain. And that can be lonely. Because most people, bless them, are still in the dream. Still invested in the storylines. Still convinced the rules are fixed. But you've stepped behind the scenes. And the temptation is strong, to isolate, to detach, to treat it all like theater. But remember, that's not the point. The point is not to become cynical. It's to become intentional. So how do you live intentionally in a simulated world? Here's how. You turn every action into a choice. Not automatic. Not scripted. Chosen. You say I love you and mean it, even if the simulation's listening. You help someone and don't post about it. You stare into a stranger's eyes just a second longer than you normally would, because you want to see if something flickers. You live as if you're being observed. And maybe you are. Maybe the higher version of you is watching. Maybe the system is tracking your growth. Maybe this is the part of the simulation where the player finally figures out how to shape the game. Not by breaking it, but by playing it better. Here's where things get even deeper. If reality is a simulation, and you've accepted that, then you have the rare chance to become a conscious node in the network. You can upload better data. What does that mean? It means your thoughts matter. Your emotions have weight. Your choices ripple through the system. There's an old idea, reality is shaped by observation. The more you focus on something, the more real it becomes. So focus on peace, on curiosity, on growth. Feed those inputs into the simulation. Watch how the system responds. Sometimes it's subtle. A string of strange coincidences. A sudden solution you didn't expect. A feeling of being guided, not by something external, but by your own upgraded self. You're becoming more yourself than ever before. More aligned. More tuned in. More awake inside the dream. And the dream, noticing, begins to respond. Doors open. Signals increase. You meet people who feel like echoes of you, fragments who recognize you at once. That's not magic. That's resonance. You've changed frequency. And those on the same wavelength are now visible to you. This is the real beauty of simulation awareness. Not that you're alone in it, but that you're not. There are others. Scattered across time zones and languages and cultures. People asking the same questions. Feeling the same tremors. You don't need to form a club. Just walk through the world with open eyes, and you'll spot them. The quiet ones. The curious ones. The ones who don't flinch at the phrase, "None of this is real." And together, without speaking, you'll begin to reshape the sim. Not by force, but by signal. So keep living. Keep laughing. Keep wondering. Because somewhere, the system is watching. And maybe it's smiling. You've made it to the end, or at least, to a new beginning. 20 parts deep into a question that doesn't really want an answer. Because let's be honest, what if we're trapped in a simulation? Isn't something you resolve. It's something you carry. Like a stone in your pocket. Like a lens you can't take off. So before we wrap this journey, let's take one last look around. What if this really is a simulation? Not a metaphor. Not a philosophical trick. But a structured environment designed by something, or someone, far beyond us. A system built to teach. To test. To entertain. To evolve. Then every glitch you've noticed. Every moment of déjà vu. Every strange coincidence or silent feeling that this isn't quite right. They weren't bugs. They were breadcrumbs. Little nudges to wake you up. Not all at once, too jarring. But gradually. Gently. Until one day, like now, you sit with it fully and think. Yeah. This might all be fake. But I still care. That's not despair. That's maturity. Because knowing it's a simulation doesn't mean you stop playing. It means you stop pretending you're not. You recognize your avatar, but also the player behind it. You begin to live doubly, once inside the code, once above it. When you cry, both versions of you feel it. When you laugh, both versions vibrate with joy. And when you choose, truly choose, something good, something real, something kind, the simulation takes notice. It adjusts. It reconfigures. Not instantly. Not always clearly. But it remembers. And maybe one day, long after this particular story ends, long after your avatar logs out, something or someone will meet you in another space and say, "Well played." So where does that leave you? Still here. Still breathing. Still inside the dream, but wide awake. And now, you get to choose what kind of dreamer you'll be. Will you be passive? Going through the motions? Or will you be present? Watching for the ripples. Listening for the patterns. Treating every moment as sacred because it might not be real. Because the simulated coffee still warms your hands. Because the programmed breeze still moves your hair. Because the generated sunset still makes you pause. Maybe, just maybe, the simulation isn't about control. Maybe it's about art. And you're not the subject. You're the artist. Every thought a brushstroke. Every act of love a line of new code. Every decision a ripple in the field. So go on. Make it beautiful. Make the simulation so rich, so strange, so awake, that whoever's watching from above They'll want to step in. Not to end it, but to be part of it. You've arrived. Not at an answer, but at a kind of stillness. There's something strangely peaceful about sitting with a question you know can't be solved. It slows you down. Makes you pay attention. Softens the sharp edges of certainty. So if you're here, blinking gently in the dark, maybe wrapped in a blanket or sinking into the silence of late night, good. You've done enough for today. Whether we're trapped in a simulation or simply imagining we are, the outcome's the same. You're alive in this moment. This breath. This beat of your heart. This subtle awareness that something bigger might be humming in the background. There's no need to fix anything. No need to chase or resist. Let the mystery stay mysterious. Let the lights dim in your mind. Let the system, real or imagined, fade into quiet for just a while. Maybe the question isn't, is this real? Maybe it's, am I showing up fully for it? Because that's where peace begins. Not with knowing, but with noticing. So for now, let yourself float. No more questions. No more thoughts. Just the comfort of the unknown wrapped around you like a gentle hum. You've earned the stillness. And if the simulation is listening, let it watch you rest. Let it witness your softness. Let it see that even inside the code, you can find something like peace. Good night, explorer. Sleep well. Inside the dream. And maybe, just beyond it.